name is Ella Kate Marisi, and you are listening to More Than Child's Play with your host, my mommy, Lacey Marisi, and my Aunt Nicole Surgeon. They are authors, therapists, and most importantly, mommies. And man, can they talk. So sit back and relax and learn from their village. We hope you enjoy the show.
Hi everyone, it's Nicole and Lacey. Welcome back to episode 4 of More Than Child's Play podcast. We're really enjoying bringing you some incredible people from our village, and we are thankful for our listeners so far and the great feedback that you're giving us. Today we are super excited to welcome Chrissy Keller to our podcast. Chrissy is a great friend of ours and a colleague for a number of years. Chrissy, we call her the Behavior Master, but officially she has a bachelor's degree in child life psychology, a master's in clinical behavior application of psychology. She has taught both regular education and special education for many years. She's certified to teach K through 12 special ed in our state here in West Virginia. And how we know her is she has previously worked for us in our early intervention system for 12 years. Currently, she's working as a behavioral specialist at the Renovo Center in Kearneysville, West Virginia. If you've seen anything on local news, you may have noticed that West Virginia is really in the thick of the opioid crisis, and the Renovo Center has done excellent work for holistic care for individuals and families struggling with this crisis in our community. So welcome, Chrissy.
Hi.
And if you could just tell us a little bit about what you specifically do at the Renovo Center. We know they do a number of wonderful things for different ages. Mm-hmm. Just tell our listeners a little bit about what you do there.
So I almost entirely work with children and young adults. I see a couple of adults, but most of my work focuses on children and families and how to support them using behavioral strategies, and also having my background in child development and being able to coordinate understanding how children and young adults learn and grow with behavior strategies that support kids who are growing atypically or families that have been through crisis, because of course we know that when you're in crisis that developing changes how we develop, how we take in information. I do some work with children and families who have had trauma, and also, we look at how family dynamics can play a part in providing supports. We have a lot of children in foster care because of the opioid crisis. Mm-hmm. And so I've been able to work with some amazing children who have really, struggled to be able to continue to grow and develop.
It's amazing work, and it's important work. Before we get started, I can just say that one of the benefits of working in early intervention with some really talented individuals is that when you have those moments as a mom where you're kind of struggling with, oh my gosh, what do I do next? Or is this right? You can quickly rely on your colleagues. And Lacey and I both personally have used Chrissy in some real moments in our parenting journey. We talk about this podcast and our business being part therapist and part mom, and on the part mom part, she's really saved us. I know in particular my daughter at 3, which I joke 3 is the new 2, really struggled with bedtime and had some extreme behavior, banging her head on the floor and really just fearful at night. And we had been to the pediatrician, and I had even taken her to see a friend who's a psychologist to do some behavioral stuff with her, and nothing was working. And Chrissy's tips worked like a charm. So my husband always refers to her as the person who saved our family and our marriage and our sanity when we had 2 and 3-year-olds in the house. And so for that, I'm forever grateful. So we're bringing her to you, not just from a place of professional experience, but from personal experience as moms. So we hope that you'll find this podcast helpful. We know she has continued to be helpful to us in both ways.
Yeah, I have to laugh because, I've called you guys both many times also.
That's the good part.
What do I do next?
That's the good part, exactly. And that's why we kind of wanted to do this podcast, is because we have such a great web of people around us, and we wanted to be able to share that with our listeners and our customers. So we're going to talk today mostly about behavior. And we think it's important to kind of set the stage that not all behavior is bad, correct?
Yeah, so when we look at behavior, it's actually everything that we do or say that's observable, right? I have no idea what's going on in your brain. And I think it's interesting because, body language speaks much more clearly than the words that we say sometimes.
That's true.
So when I look at any behavior, I always try to be very clear, what did you see happening? Or what did you hear happening, and be as descriptive as possible. But it doesn't always mean it's bad at all. Behavior is everything we do. So, behavior is finding something funny the moment that you laughed out loud and you look at that person's face in joy. That's a behavior. So we recognize what's reinforcing to a person. The same thing if somebody is fearful. We look at what their behavior is, and that's how we recognize what's fearful. It's pretty exciting because a lot of people can misinterpret cues, and of course you have people who don't always understand what body language means, or who overreact or who underreact. So there's lots of different components that go into it. And what's nice is how complex it is. It's kind of exciting and interesting too.
Yeah. I remember when I was a grad student and I did an internship at Easter Seals, and there was a behavioral specialist there, and it was the first time I had ever been exposed to anyone who looked so intricately at behavior. Mm-hmm. And they did an in-service on charting behavior, the predecessory, I'm saying that wrong. The behavior that comes before.
The antecedent. And
yes. See, this is when a physical
all
therapist has to say these things. But
so, okay, so
yes.
What's funny is, again, like as you're saying that.
But to break it down, to
yes.
see like what happened before, what led to this behavior. Were they tired? Was there someone antagonizing them? When did they eat last? And to be able to see people, professionals, tracking that and seeing the outcome and seeing how that could be shaped and molded was really interesting to me.
Yes.
So I love to hear about this, and I'm excited to see what you have to share.
When people use language, it's so funny. I remember when I started for Birth to 3, and I kept being told, no, don't use those words. Change the words you're using.
Yes.
And so now those words are no longer on the tip of my tongue, and you're saying it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, because I really broke it down into literally what did we see.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Which is easy for families to understand and easy for other people.
Yes.
Like physical therapists trying to understand. So, is there an age where you commonly see the largest behavioral challenges, or there's behavioral challenges in every age?
Yeah, there's behavioral challenges in every age, from the point of development probably until, believe it or not, mid-adulthood to late adulthood, right? Because we have things that we're all supposed to be learning and growing and doing at those stages. And when we look at behavioral challenges, usually they occur because something is impeding our way of learning, growing, or developing, or conflicting with the way we're learning, growing, or developing, right? And something that's super easy and super nice and friendly is, of course, Erickson. When we look at a model of child development and we go all the way up to the elderly in our community, and that very last stage of development, the very end, is wisdom. Mm-hmm. So you just don't get it until you've gone through all these other stages. That's it. Can we get there, and then we might finally be wise.
I've read before too that the brain sort of swells and then prunes out connections it doesn't need.
That's right.
And I always think it's funny that, isn't it true that happens in toddlerhood and then again in teenage years?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So if you're listening with a toddler, you're not done. It's going to happen again when you're a teenager. And if you're listening with a teenager, you've done this once. So you know what's coming, right? Different behavior, but similar challenges. Okay, so let's talk about behavior specifically and curbing it.
Okay, so I do have some absolute favorite tools for behavior that I prefer more than anything. So in simple terms, we always look at from the idea of understanding reinforcers. And I know like positive behavior support in theory is this big movement in a lot of the states. And I don't think there's anything wrong with looking at things from the perspective of reinforcers. But in the years that I've done work, what I actually have seen is even more effective are things like overcorrecting or practicing the desired behavior. And the other thing is something called an errorless learning procedure. So I'm coming at it, again, not always from typical development, but more from crisis or atypical development. We're looking at exhaustion, or we're looking at illness in the family. So not even a defined, disability, but just in general, things are not going smoothly because of other circumstances, right? And so when we look at that, it's really hard to learn when you're in crisis. And it doesn't matter what age you are, it's hard to learn. And so errorless learning procedure broken down just means we provide what you need to do, but we've already broken down the steps for you and you're just practicing doing it the right way. Typical developing, when things are going well, kids are curious, young adults are curious, and that's what we want, right? We want that curiosity to be engaged. But when you're exhausted because you're trying to just survive, you just need to learn how to do a skill. And so when we see kids in crisis, like in the school system or in the home, because of many different things that could occur, we want to just give them the skill. And once they have the skill, they're going to develop some pride and they're going to have foundations that they need to keep learning and growing, right, without the hiccups. So that's the biggest thing that I really believe in is errorless learning.
So does that work? I mean, I could see that working for a child without
absolutely
crisis or trauma.
It does. The only difference is whether or not you're trying to do something, maybe say quickly, versus we don't want to impede the normal development that includes curiosity and trial and error, because there's a certain amount of pride in doing something well that you figured out on your own, and that's a huge part of development.
Right.
So we never want to take that away. This errorless procedure is more, you can use it with anything. So, for example, spelling. Spelling with a typical child, right? So how do I use an errorless procedure if my kid is really struggling with spelling and I'm like, you know what, in the big picture of things, we just need to get it done. You're going to do things like, we're going to find the word, you're going to find the word match. You're going to circle the word and point to the right one. You're going to have 3 words, one's misspelled. Which one's misspelled? It's very easy to pick out what's wrong. But every time they practice it, just like a fire drill, it becomes a little bit more familiar because our brain takes it in. We start to recognize patterns, especially if you're developing in a typical way, but you're just tired or have too many things going on, right? Mm-hmm. So we can do that with any skill. We can turn anything into an errorless learning procedure. That's one of the easiest modifications there are to make. Anyone can make it, and it just comes down to practice.
So anything in the daily routine, like getting along with your sibling, doing your chores.
Absolutely. Any of it. So getting along with your sibling, you script it. We're going to script it and practice it. We're going to do a little game. We're going to read from a script. We're going to follow these rules, and you play it just like you would play a game, right? That's how you practice it. That's an errorless learning procedure. Doing a chore, you're going to write out the steps. You're going to break them down. The very first step is finding the broom. Let's go look for where the broom is. I have kids who can't seem to find anything. So, that's often the first step in my house, no matter what I do.
Yeah, that's true. What about nutrition?
Well, I want to go back. One more thing. So the other one I mentioned was overcorrection. And overcorrection is actually something I prefer to punishment, although it can be punishing. And I use that word punishment very, very loosely, right? Remember, we have a model at times that's used in the schools and the daycares that is just based on reinforcers. But the reality is that for a lot of these children, especially when you're angry or upset, you just don't know what to do in that moment. You lose your language, you lose everything. So say you throw something, right? I'm going to say, all right, I know you're angry, I know you're upset, but we're going to put it down. And we're going to practice putting it down. And we're going to put it down until you know how to put it down, because throwing isn't safe. And then when you're done practicing it, and again, it can seem very hard, because I tend to say you want to do it anywhere from 3 to 10 times, depending on the child, the age, and the situation. But at the end of it, you get to praise them. You get to say, look at you. You know how to put it down. You got this.
So instead of, and I might be wrong, but instead of a timeout or a sticker chart or something more conventional. It would be repeating the positive behavior that you want many times in a row.
Yeah, to make sure that you are able to do it, you recognize to do it, it becomes a habit. And also then you're getting praised for it. When we put kids in timeout is something, this is one of my pet peeves. Timeout has been misused for so many years and in so many situations. It's really very frustrating to me. And so there is only one reason I ever use timeout, and that is a full-blown tantrum, and you just need space and time to just calm down. Not for safety, like I'm not going to use that if you're not safe to be by yourself, but if you're a mess, you need to just calm down. That's
how timeout's supposed to be used.
Correct.
And the original intention of timeout was the timeout is for both the child and the parent, correct? I mean, it's kind of time for both ends to cool and.
It can be. The actual original purpose of timeout historically was it was used in settings where, like group homes or hospitals, where you had individuals with significant special needs. And so what was created was a timeout room, and that was a padded room with a door, and they would go in there, and these were individuals who truly were hurting themselves. And so they would have what was called a timeout from stimulation. And it was giving them a space where there was no noise and there was no anything. And of course it was abused, because human nature, for some reason, seems to always involve some type of taking something that could work and be safe and turning it into something that's not okay. But somebody somewhere said, oh, let's do this for our toddlers, and they compared our toddlers to that. Well, no, there's a function to a tantrum, and we need you to learn how to calm down, and that learning how to calm down also involves being safe. And like you said, if things are overwhelming, going to a place where nobody is overwhelmed, whoever it needs to be. But we were putting kids into timeout for everything. Well, I don't know about you guys, but the examples I always use are, if I'm really angry about something and you make me go sit somewhere and think about it, I'm going to think of all the ways I can get back at you. Right?
True. I mean, that's true.
Okay. And then the other thing is I'm going to get really savvy about being sneaky. I'm going to figure out how to not get caught a little bit more. And so I'm like, why are we doing timeout? If the child did something wrong, but they're still in control, why aren't we practicing what we wanted them to do and then giving them the praise they deserve for learning it?
What happens when the child knows what they're doing is wrong and they know what they should be doing, but they still do it?
So what's the function of that behavior, right?
Yeah.
So every child is an individual.
Do they need a punishment?
Sometimes, but I'm going to look at what we consider as natural consequences, and we've gotten away from those.
Yeah, they're so important.
They are, right?
And so effective.
Yeah, so we really have gotten away from them, though. So we have all these kids, and you did something wrong. Well, what's a natural consequence? No one's going to play with you. Another natural consequence, you know what? You took so long avoiding that chore, we can't go now. Right. Well, guess what? I'm not giving up my day tomorrow to take you to get your sneakers because you wasted today. You're going to have to wear your old broken sneakers for another week. Those are natural consequences. But we really don't do that. We kind of make life very, very easy. And I think that's
growth in the struggle. There's always growth in the struggle. So we rob kids of the opportunity to, I do it too.
Yeah.
So I'm not.
So do I.
Preaching to the choir, but.
Absolutely. But we really want to look at what would be a natural consequence. And sometimes I look at it in my job. So like even with my own kids, if I did that behavior, what would be a natural consequence, right? And years ago, and I go back sometimes historically because we've lost some of this, but years ago, kids kind of went out and played on their own. And if a kid did something naughty or wrong, they lost their friends. Right? Then they had to work out. Oh, I guess I should do it this way. I guess I better apologize. I guess I better share.
They developed social skills.
They did.
And they don't have the chance now to do that as much.
They don't. We really micromanage a lot of that. And we also kind of micromanage some of the social interactions, so they're not always genuine.
Right.
And that's, a loss to our children.
Right. Yeah, and that's, we kind of had on our list here to chat about play trends and how that's affecting children. And that kind of segues right into that right now, because when they have that, and this is obviously something that's very important to Lacey and I, it's one of the reasons why we started our business, but that playtime, that unstructured playtime, loosely unsupervised playtime, has so many benefits.
Yeah, so this is, again, I'm going to have a little bit of a historical context here because this is what we're seeing and what we're not seeing anymore. For one thing, we're not seeing mixed ages anymore. And when we look at daycares and we look at schools, we had growth from having mixed ages for generations and generations. We learned from the kids who were a little older than us. We learned from the kids who were a little older than them. We learned from cousins, and we learned from younger aunts and uncles. We learned from the big kids down the street. And that's really, like, they were our role models. That was a very genuine job for them as well, right? Good or bad, but that's how we did it. The other thing that we're not seeing because of the nature of things, I guess, is a lot of the games that we played as very young children had an important job. And they go back, they're cross-cultural, they go by different names, they go back, again, hundreds and hundreds of years and slightly different things depending on tools that were available. So one example I try to give people, we play a game, I think, red light, green light, right? And what does that do? That teaches you to stop. And you learn to follow rules, and you learn to play with other kids, and you learn to be a gracious loser because there's like 8 kids who lose. There's only one winner, and you want to play again. Right? Or Mother May I, which is teaching you how to follow directions.
Yeah.
And we don't play those games anymore.
No.
And so our kids have really lost out at a very young age because they don't have those types of social opportunities. And when we look at this, even from a bigger perspective, like how did kids always get that in there, even if they didn't have a group on the street or they didn't have a group on their block? Kindergarten was the playtime. And really, kindergarten was a great playtime because they had just gotten in command of their motor skills, gross motor skills. They're developing fine motor skills. Instead, we have them sitting for long periods of time. Really, what they're supposed to be doing is learning how to coordinate with the cognitive skills that go along with
body and brain.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Problem solving, following directions, learning how to play with others, learning who to imitate, who not to imitate. But instead we have them sitting and following a lot of directions and not developing that integration of skills.
And sadly, I think, not with all kids, but some kids then sort of giving them a negative impression of learning because it doesn't match what their bodies and their brains want to do. So they're already they're defensive and they're struggling with a place that they should be loving and embracing.
Yeah. Well, and we've also taken away curiosity because they're really given a lot, and because we're so time crunched, we've lost a lot of opportunity to just be able to engage. There was something to be said for go outside and play and come back when it's dark. And even a 5-year-old was able to do that because they went with their 7 and 9-year-old siblings, right? I mean, you had families. So, like, I noticed families and bigger groups just played together. It doesn't mean always. I'm not glorifying it, right? We had lots of other things that needed to be done at those time frames, but these are the skills that were developed. We're really community oriented in human nature, and we've taken that piece away. And a big chunk of it was learning how to be an active part as a community.
Right. The other day we went to have dinner at a friend's house, and there was a handful of kids there, mixed ages, anywhere from like 10 to 16, maybe even. And they were playing hide and go seek in the house. And thankfully the person who owned the house didn't mind. So I was thankful and happy about that. But they were playing it in such a weird way. And I was like, what are you guys doing? And they said, she taught us this new game. And when the first person who's it finds the second person, they hide together. And then somebody else has to find them. And the 3 of them hide together until there's one person left looking for all the people. And I was like, I've never seen hide and go seek that way. But I have to say, I was so excited that they weren't holding a device and they were running around the house, mixed ages, and learning a new game that I hadn't even seen before from each other. It was sadly refreshing.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's so many versions of games like that out there that can be played in a house or outside and it is beautiful to see, but look at how many ways today we stop them. Like kids used to climb trees. Don't climb the tree, you might break something.
Right.
You know, we've actually limited playground equipment. And I understand the concept of safety so much. I get it in many ways. But part of it is learning how to be safe and learning how to know what your limits are and then building on it.
And we talked about that when we did our podcast with the occupational therapist that we interviewed. And she said, you know, when a child's climbing a tree and they have to problem solve, how am I going to get down? And my friends are going to tell me which limb to put my foot on. And, you know, that's confidence building. It's building for your strength and your vestibular system and all kinds of things. And, you know, these little safe. No, I mean, kids can fall anywhere, but what society considers a safe playground limits those options too.
So that actually segues into this other concept, right? That I've been seeing more of. I would have to definitely read more research to know if it affects different ages in different ways, but that's anxiety. We're seeing tons of kids with anxiety all the time. And so one of the things that I look at is anxiety itself is ingrained in us so that we have this little, this is how you have to be a little bit safer. But we've created so much safety that now kids are anxious about everything because they're not able to hone in and develop their own safety cues. You know, anxiety is important. We want it. It motivates us to move. It motivates us to get work done. It motivates us to look around and identify what our environment looks like. And we also aren't giving kids the opportunity to develop that. And so what happens is they're developing these responses of anxiety and not recognizing it's in them to be safe and secure.
We hear that all the time. My kids can't sleep. They're biting the skin off the side of their fingers. They're throwing up for no, you know, identifiable reason. So many, thankfully, parents, when they see that, seek out help and counseling. But even the rates on depression and suicide with younger and younger children, and it's so troubling.
Yeah, it comes down to we're not really addressing development in, you know, in a way that's meant to be, which we have. We have the years and years of data on child development. We have that there are certain skills that all children in humanity develop, maybe in slightly different ways based on culture or environment, but these are skills that we're meant to have as human beings, and we've limited them. And so when we look at behavior specifically, what occurs is exactly what you said. So the behavior of the anxiety is the biting and the chewing. It manifests itself in unhealthy behaviors.
Right. I've never really thought about it that way, though, in terms of too much anxiety because we've made it too safe.
Yeah.
I mean, I've read about risk taking and that's important, and letting them make their own decisions and have a certain amount of control of their life is important. But that's interesting that you say, you know, letting things be reasonably unsafe too, so that they can develop an internal sense.
Yeah. Of reasonable anxiety. What do you really need to be anxious about?
What's a true thing to worry about?
Yeah. And to understand that you can work through it. They're not given the opportunity to truly work through things. We give them answers. You know, I can give a kid statistics or not, but they just don't have the opportunity to work through it. And what I find that's really interesting, so when we look at teenage behavior again, and we look at anxiety rates with teenagers, one of the conflicts of teenage identity development is, on one hand, they're identifying who they are and what they believe and what they are, and they want to gain a certain level of independence. And on the other hand, they really want to fit in.
Yeah,
right?
They just want to be normal.
They do. And so there's this huge conflict there that they're struggling to figure out. Well, then when you add into it how many kids are really struggling with things like anxiety and depression, it does spread. It does make people say, oh, I must be depressed. Oh, I must have anxiety. And instead of us as a community saying, no, we can problem solve. You guys can be curious and engaged and independent and figure out, here, I'll give you the tools you need to do this. You're not in danger. All right, you might break an arm, but you're not going to die, right?
And I think, too, we rob them of the opportunity of what pain teaches you, or
Absolutely.
what discomfort teaches you.
Absolutely. You have to be able to tolerate it, right? So go back to development. Our 2-year-olds who are overly frustrated and 3-year-olds who are overly frustrated. And so we make them learn how to tolerate frustration, but we're still doing it in a very prescribed way often because our lives are so busy, we don't have time for them to sort it out. We just don't.
No.
And then they grow into kids who can't sort it out. And now they're really uncomfortable and they don't have a tolerance for frustration. We were talking in my house the other day, so go back to games and play that teach you things, right? And some of this is good and some of it's overgeneralized, but I was thinking about even Monopoly. Why do we play Monopoly? Well, the TV shut off at 11 o'clock because there were no, in the 70s, that was the end of it.
Yep.
Before that, there wasn't any TV, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what you did. You played games that lasted for hours, but you really learned how to sit and engage and problem solve and figure things out, even as you were growing up through game playing and those interactions. And you were doing it often with some mixed ages, but, close to the same age kind of people. Sometimes the adults joined in, depending on the generation you were in. We've taken away the playful opportunities to also develop appreciation of tolerance and problem solving that kind of help them learn and grow and not be as fearful.
That's true. You talk about being busy, and on our first podcast, we talked with Kelly Benson-Vogt, who is a feeding specialist, and we talked a lot about nutrition and trends in nutrition and eating on the go and the lack of family meals. And I'm just curious what you're seeing in terms of nutrition and the role in behavior.
Definitely seeing issues that apply to behavior. I loved working with our nutritionists in birth to 3. I loved it. I can honestly say we had a number of times, and I think we've been on teams where parents would see a behavior and we're like, no, this is related to they're missing nutrients, or they're only eating one type of food, or they're still hungry. It's another one that I kind of struggle with a little bit because we have a problem with obesity in this country, but I think it has more to do with not moving versus eating. And the other piece is we eat very controlled. We don't do a lot of that munching throughout the day of healthy things to keep your body from getting too hungry. And so I'll have these parents who are like, they're always hungry and they throw a fit, but they can't have anything to eat because dinner's in 2 hours. I'm like, they're probably hitting a growth spurt. Like, of course they're hungry. I know, I have a teenage boy. Oh my gosh, I can always tell he's about to grow an inch because he can't stop eating and sleeping. Well, that's human. And
you pay attention to his body and his behavior. It tells you something.
Yeah, and we see this with our 2-year-olds. We see this all the time with 2 and 3-year-olds. And then what happens is they understand food as a control issue. So now on top of that, we are actually using that to control things. And really, we have history and we have research that shows that grazing is okay. Now, the flip of that is we have parents who feed snacks to their kids all day long. So I'm not talking about that.
And grazing on carb-heavy things or snack crackers, chips, those kinds of things.
Right. It's one extreme of our culture versus, oh, you just got home from school. Of course you're hungry. Have an apple.
Right.
Right? Go have it. In fact, you can have as many apples as you want. I'm not going to limit you on apples. I'm not going to limit you on bananas.
Right.
I might limit you on the goldfish crackers.
Right.
What
about preservatives, additives with attention and overstimulation? Do you see that?
I do see it, but I'm not in a controlled setting. So technically, you have doctors that say it doesn't exist and you have companies that say it doesn't exist. What I have observed is that when we eat closer to a genuine product, our bodies are healthier and happier. Kids are calmer. Kids are able to play and focus. I've literally observed kids who, when we remove dyes from their diet, they are able to start talking. Like some of the things that occur that it's really interesting because you'll hear, oh, that's not true, and then you see it firsthand.
Yeah.
I definitely think, and we look at generational, we look at where our food comes from, that our food is being grown very differently. And so there's a lot of basis, and a lot of people out there say one thing or another in conflict. And my point has always been to any family, just try it. You can try it. You try it for 30 days because that's what we know about new habits. Gets out of your system. You're going to know if you see a difference or not. If you see a difference, great, you're on the right track. And if you don't, great. And nobody's going to be hurt by trying this out.
Right. That's good advice. So we opened up the opportunity of having you here to our listeners on social media and through email. And I have to say, even though we're a relatively new podcast, the floodgates opened because parents need help and they did not shy away from questions. So we're going to kind of hit some of the common things that listeners asked about. And a big one was biting. So can you tell us just a little bit about why children bite, what your recommendations are to curb or stop the behavior, and basically what do we need to know about biting?
Okay, so from a behavioral perspective, of course, biting is a form of communication. It's observable. Why do children learn to bite? It's an instinct. That's the bottom line. If you can't talk, we're all instinct when we're very little. But then what also happens is if you bite someone, you're immediately removed from the situation. So technically, we're always reinforcing the act of biting in many ways. Because why do you bite? You bite because you're frustrated and angry, and then you're removed from the situation that made you frustrated and angry.
So you don't learn then to manage that situation because you're just removed from it.
Yeah, and that's part of it. And I recognize you have to have safety and you have to have all of those things, right? But in that moment, you also have to look at what was going on when that child bit the other person. Why are they biting? Is it because they're still at a younger developmental level? Do we need to provide them with different things to play or different levels of monitoring? There's a piece that goes along with that. From a cultural perspective, it's not always realistic, right? Like I've certainly been in homes where they're like, my kid's going to be kicked out of daycare. I have to work. We can't lose our spot in daycare. And of course, nobody should be getting bit. Like I don't want anybody's child to go home hurt either. And so when you get to the point where we're looking at not at home, where you can really rectify it by meeting their developmental needs, helping them learn how to communicate and problem solve, but you're in a daycare and you just got to fix it because they don't have the ability to really work on it at that micro level. I do a very behavioral approach, and that is pair it with a bad taste. And by bad taste, I never, ever mean something that should hurt a child. So my example is some kids, and some kids love this. Salad dressing is one that I've seen some kids don't like salad dressing. Another one is apple cider vinegar, which we had talked about before. But I've had kids who hated grapes and strawberries. Well, then I'm going to take a little tiny piece of grape and touch their lip with it. The idea being every time you bite, you're going to pair it with something that you don't like but isn't going to hurt you. And so you're going to stop biting. It really still isn't meeting the function of the biting, which is teaching them what to do instead. And that has to occur in order to truly support that child in their development. But it is going to teach them that biting is not okay. And that's okay too.
So maybe using the aversive taste as a deterrent and then saying, you were frustrated because you wanted that toy. Let's practice asking for it.
Yep.
Or let's practice sharing or whatever.
Yeah.
But as an SLP, I'm going to come in here real quick. You have to keep the language simple.
Yep.
At the age when biting occurs, 2-3 years old, they're not ready for the long explanation of, you made your friend so sad, you hurt their feelings.
Correct.
You got to keep it simple and direct so that they understand what you're saying to them and can then apply whatever replacement behavior you're modeling. So.
Yeah, and they might not yet be ready to communicate, period. It might just be using a sign. Right.
If they don't have the words, then they're using the biting in place of communicating.
Right. And sometimes we're looking at some unrealistic expectations on the children. Mm-hmm. They're little. Mm-hmm. I mean, we really are very interesting because on one hand, we baby our children and we're told that we've created this nation of millennials who have been babied. But on the other hand, we're forcing our babies and toddlers to do things that really aren't always developmentally appropriate. Mm-hmm.
So
Sharing
understanding the expectations plug for 1, 2, 3, just play with me. That's another way it can be used to understand what's typical so that you're not expecting more than what they're, and you know, that's different for every kid because I remember when I was a student, I was in the school system working with a 4 or 5-year-old on crawling. He had significant motor delays and he was nonverbal and he was peaceful and happy and easygoing and he showed no signs of distress or that he didn't like the activity or the position I was putting him in. And all of a sudden, he quickly reared his head around and bit me and broke my skin. And I was like, what? Why the heck did he do that? But, you know, he obviously became uncomfortable, but didn't have a way to communicate it. So very basic, very primitive. He was going to stop it, and he did. So it's different for every kid. If they don't have the tools, we have to figure out a way to give them a different system of identifying when they've had enough or they've been pushed too far or they're unhappy or uncomfortable.
Yeah, and again, that's a good way to start looking at your baseline for tolerating frustration, right? So your baseline would be, you know what, this child isn't ready to be in a small group of kids. They're not. Or maybe there's a bigger kid there who doesn't know how to play nicely. Maybe the issue is teaching a different child how to play. You know, I have an interesting way of looking at, sometimes I'll see everyone says, oh, just give it to the baby, to the older siblings. And then eventually the baby's with other kids and doesn't know how to give it up, right? Well, we've created that situation versus really letting them learn in little ways like, well, these are the baby's toys, and then telling the baby gently, no, that's your sister's toy, that one you don't get to play with. So that they're learning to understand that there are some things they don't get and some things they do. Instead, it seems that we kind of leave them on their own in certain situations.
But then expect that they have the tools to do what they want.
And then punish them, right?
And then punish them for doing what they don't know.
Right.
Yeah. Another thing that came in consistently from listeners was struggles with transitions and behavioral reactions that really range from mildly upset to physically tantruming, where children will bite, kick, scream, do the famous flop and drop. Why is transitioning from one activity to the other so hard? How can we help kids with it? And what's your best advice for parents regarding the physical nature of the tantrum? So when the child totally loses it and they're physically out of control, what do we do?
So again, we're looking at different developmental stages. We're looking at, is this child developing fairly typically, or is this child dealing with some type of issue that makes it harder for them to develop skills? And all of those things are going to affect the way that we would support that child. But from a generalized behavioral context, we have to again look at our culture and transitions. For a long time, you know, kids just played when they were little. That's what you did. You played. You didn't go to the store every day, and you didn't go out to eat, and you didn't run here, and you didn't run there. There's not a lot of downtime to help kids adjust or cope. Sometimes they're just exhausted. Sometimes the transition itself is really difficult because they're really enjoying what they're doing, and we're stopping them on a dime, literally. You know, playtime isn't 1 hour from 3 to 4 every day. For a little kid, playtime is their whole world, which you guys know. That's everything to them. They are learning, they're growing, developing all of their skills and strengths and all of their behaviors. And we're literally saying, okay, you're all done with this skill now, let's move on.
And we often will say, you know, imagine you're doing something you love, reading or exercising or taking a nap or whatever, and someone bigger and older than you says, okay, done, put your shoes on, we're going here.
Yes.
And you have no control.
Yes.
Which, as a child, you know, you are at the mercy of your parent, but the abrupt switch is so hard.
And probably too many switches.
Yeah.
Like, you're just done. I'm done. Why can't I just do this? I had been thinking about another example, because yours is the normal, right? The adult. Nobody gets to tell me to stop when I like something. And then the flip of it, of course, is I've also learned when I need to stop, but it's still hard. If I'm in the middle of a good book, I'm going to read to the end of the chapter.
Yeah.
Right? But then I was thinking, what are some really difficult transitions for adults to help them understand? And imagine you're getting ready to leave for work, and you've got to get everyone out the door, and you spill your coffee on your clothes, and you didn't get to the dry cleaner, and you can't change your clothes, and all of a sudden you're like a mess because you've got to figure out on a dime how to make everything work because something changed, you know?
Yeah.
And there's that component to it, because for us, that's a big deal. For a child, having to stop or change, or because something spilled, or because they couldn't get to something, they are just a big deal. You know, that's a bigger percentage of their life when we look at amount of time and energy and effort and the number of years they've lived, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So
we talk about this in our lecture on play that we do for MedBridge, and some of the suggestions we give are a timer and with sand so that they can see when the activity's up. We've modeled and shared a start-finish bin with some suggestions that we actually got from the School for the Blind for kids that are visually impaired, because they can feel a tangible object, and when they're finished brushing their teeth, they could put a toothbrush in the finish bin so they know what comes next. So picture schedules work for some kids. Are there are those good? Are there any other suggestions for managing the transition that you see being successful?
Yeah, so for some kids, especially because you can't always use something like that, like if you're on the go, or if maybe you have a child who's not responsive to that, I actually like mini transitions that provide comfort and provide routine. And you want them to be able to be changed a little bit here and there. So an example of a mini transition would be taking a preferred activity and pairing it just before that transition, which is unpreferred. One example would be bedtime. You know, it's time to read our favorite story together. We're going to snuggle. Most kids really do enjoy that time together, right? And it does help them transition to bedtime. That's a common one we all do. Another one would be, even though we just talked about nutrition, you get your favorite snack as soon as we get in the car. Or, you know, you get your grapes as soon as we get in the car. So getting in the car. One of the things that I used was a travel bag. So if we had to leave the house, my kids' favorite toys were actually only in the travel bag. And I don't mean their literal favorite, but toys they loved. And so that was only when we had to go somewhere. And so that made the act of stopping and going or waiting and going a little bit bearable. Yeah, really making it be. And what that's also teaching our kids is, you know what, going somewhere that we don't like doesn't have to be a burden. So today, a lot of people use their screens. That's what they give their kids, right? And I think about all the things I learned from my grandmother. Like, I'd have to walk with her to the bank. When I was little, maybe 4 or 5 years old. I learned how to sing songs when we were walking, and I learned how to play silly games like I Spy when we were walking. You know, there was a lot of skills that I was developing, but they were fun.
And social interaction with an adult that you trusted and loved. Yeah,
and it was fun, right? So much fun. So I hated waiting in line at the bank, but it was fun. And then guess what you got when you got to the counter? Do you guys remember what you got?
Lollipop.
Yes, it was the best thing ever. Why? Because we didn't have lollipops in every house.
Yeah.
It was a big deal.
Was a treat.
Yeah.
A special treat.
Yep.
Yeah, we have a few blogs with items for play on the go, because if we are going to take our kids on the go, I think it's important to remember that we need to bring things that are age appropriate and fun for them, besides a screen, so that they're entertained and can play anywhere. If we're going to stop their play, they should have the opportunity to do it at the restaurant, in line, in the car, wherever.
Well, so one other thing is, you know, remember a tantrum. What is a tantrum literally? And when I say that, I mean a true tantrum, not a child who has learned how to manipulate, because that's you know, part of the smart of being a kid. But they're out of control. And they're out of control because they're overwhelmed almost always. At the end of it all, that is the function of that behavior. I'm angry, upset, and overwhelmed, and I don't know what to do. And so I'm screaming and yelling and crying. And so how do we help them? It's just those basic steps of teaching them self-control and teaching them how to tolerate frustration. That's not always punishing, We can't always be punishing.
Right. So when they're physically kicking, screaming on the floor.
That's literally your time for timeout. That is the only time I ever use it. So timeout for me, for this purpose, can look in several different ways. For some kids, depending on their age, it can be you go on the couch and you can kick and scream. I'm going to be nearby. I'm not going to be angry or upset. I'm going to be very calm and comforting, because it's really important to know that they're safe. And it's really important to know once they've calmed down that you can say, I'm so glad you've calmed down. For some kids, it means going to their bedroom. And one of the things that has been interesting for me is that a lot of parents will be, go to your room until I call you, or go to your room for an hour or whatever. That's really not what the goal is, though. The timeout should be, your room is your safe space where you go to calm down, not where you go to be punished, right? And you have to change that paradigm to, oh, this is my safe space. And as soon as I'm calm, I can leave my room and rejoin everybody because I've done what I'm supposed to do. If the function of a tantrum involves being overwhelmed and you've learned to be in control, we should be reinforcing that. You did a great job calming down.
Yeah.
Absolutely, you can be here with us.
I have one child that's very spirited and emotional, and she came that way. And when she was 2, she would scream and cry and couldn't get it together. And I remember even at 18 months taking her to her crib and saying, you're not in trouble, but you need to calm down.
Yeah.
And when you're okay, I'll come back.
Yeah.
And she used to cry and scream and kick and wail, and then she'd sniffle and be fine, and she'd yell from her crib, I good now, Mama. I calm. I done now, Mama. And I would go and get her from the crib and say, okay, you calmed yourself down. Like,
Perfect.
yeah, we all have to learn how to get ourselves together.
Yes.
Right, and giving kids the time and the space to learn that skill, not punishing it. And I think we sometimes, as parents, we don't have time for the tantrum.
Yeah.
We're aggravated already with the child because they're not doing what we're wanting them to do. So we just automatically turn it into this negative situation where we're punishing that behavior. But really the kid is saying to us, give me the time and space.
Yeah.
Give me the calm and comfort. Model that for me so that I can learn then to manage it. Because they do want to be a part of what we're doing. They do want to join the group. We're social, by nature. So it's just so important. And a lot of these behavioral tips that Chrissy has given to me over the years and to Nicole and any of the families we work with, they're so simple when she breaks it down for us and makes such a huge difference. So
sometimes we overthink it and do too much.
Yeah.
So the best strategy then for cooling off is really giving space and modeling the positive behavior.
It can be, right? And I always tell parents, what do you do to cool off? What do you do when you lose it? Well, we have outlets. We exercise or we talk to a friend. Well, they can't. Sometimes it is being physical. Okay, so give them a safe space to be physical and teach them a safe way to be physical. It could be throwing rolled up socks. You guys have probably heard me talk about that. It's one of my favorite things. Take your mismatched socks, roll them up, because when you are that angry, you need a physical outlet. If you're a family that typically would go for a run or lift weights when you're frustrated and angry, you know what? Why wouldn't your child also want to do something physical to calm themselves down? There is nothing wrong with that.
That's great advice. What about, we had a question about instilling kindness and empathy, particularly between siblings. And we're just wondering, is that just, do you come out empathetic? Can empathy be taught? How can we teach our children to be aware of others, especially those in their family, and recognize others?
So the answer is, for some people, they are naturally empathic, and some, it's personality, right? Can it be taught? Yeah, it can be taught, but we have to model it. I think back, and this is something, having gone through tween years and teen years a little bit, I think of being at places where mothers are like talking about how they can't stand bullies, and then they're back talking and saying comments about somebody else, another adult, and think their kids aren't picking up on that.
Right.
We are the biggest role models our kids have, and that's the bottom line. They're learning from us, and so if we're not modeling empathy, they're not going to learn it. And sometimes we expect them to learn it at too young of an age or too young of a stage. just because they're not ready to demonstrate themselves developmentally doesn't mean they're not learning it and they're not going to do it when they get older. What's most important is that we're showing them what empathy looks like and recognizing that it's something you do because we are part of society.
Pointing out others' things or people in society that might need our attention or need our friendship.
Yeah, and simple little things like we were talking about, like, little kids. So a good example would be a kid finds a bird that fell out of a tree, and we know you don't put it back in the tree, but you talk to them about, oh, I love that you cared about that bird, and this is what's going to happen, and the mama's going to come and bring it food, maybe, or, but this is how nature works, but if we touch it, then the mama won't come for it at all. And we really use those little moments to reinforce that they did something. But then other things we can do is, oh, there's a dog, maybe we should leave some water out for it, or participating in activities. So one thing I'm going to say that makes a big difference is we've all done, I think, the shoe boxes, right? Giving to families. But the shoe boxes, they kind of understand it, but it's not the same thing as actually representing and seeing and giving to somebody up personal and getting to have that honest exchange between a living, breathing person. And that doesn't always mean sympathy. It means empathy again, like, wow, you know what? My shoelace broke. It stinks. It's awful. The child's crying and upset because their favorite shoelace broke. I'm using it as an example.
Right.
Well, empathy is understanding their emotion, not always understanding their situation, saying, oh, you are so sad right now. I can tell you really loved and cared for that shoelace. And of course, I'm being silly when I say shoelace, but just modeling the language, right? And just modeling the understanding, because that's all we ever want. We want to be heard and understood.
Yeah.
So empathy can develop. There's some people who are never going to quite be that way. Yeah, personality-wise. We can still teach, though, what is an expectation of our culture or society.
Right. And I like open-ended questions. Like, this happened to so-and-so. I wonder how they must be feeling.
As long as the child understands feelings.
Right.
And the nuances of feelings. We talked a little bit a while back about the screen time, right? And one thing that I've noticed is we've lost an understanding of nuances. And so if we also want to develop empathy, I think we also want to develop an understanding of those nuances of emotions.
That's why Sesame Street is so important. Because Sesame Street is so good at that.
Yes.
They're so good at feelings.
And that's what we want,
And understanding feelings.
So you mentioned kindness and siblings. Again, we have to look at their developmental stages. What are they trying to do? What are they trying to accomplish? If one child is trying to learn how to be independent and the other child is learning how to play with the one who's trying to be independent, there's going to be some conflict. Yeah. That doesn't mean that they don't love each other. Sometimes also the act of fighting and not getting along and us supporting them through that to resolve, you don't have to like each other very much right now, but you have to be able to be in the same room. How do we learn conflict resolution?
Yeah.
Same thing. That's how we learn it.
Our siblings are some of our best teachers.
Yes.
In that regard.
Yeah, and a lot comes down to, in the end, how do we teach it? So going back to, I see a lot of parents who, they're like, oh, just give it to the baby. The older sibling has to always give in. Well, what that's really teaching them is to hate the baby. Right? Why are they ever going to want to be best friends with the person who got everything from them? And the other interesting thing is, I saw this in my own home with other cousins and children and other dynamics. And that was, my daughter was the oldest, right? So when she was 3 or 4, she was very independent and did some great things, but she was still only 3 or 4. And so if somebody was like, can you share with your baby cousin or can you do this? But when that baby cousin was 3 or 4, they were still the baby. So now they're still getting everything. They're not being taught any of the skills because we kind of create these roles.
Yeah.
And we don't allow children to develop into what they should be doing at that stage of development.
Right. I read something. I love Drew Barrymore, and she has 2 girls, and she was writing something about their personalities, and she said if they were locked in a room and there was a bomb, the older one would be like, okay, this is the plan. We're going to figure out how to detonate it. And the younger one would be like, we only got 2 minutes left. I'm going to dance and enjoy my time. And I laughed because I was kind of like, that's really how my girls are. And I wonder all the time, did they come out like that? And we probably made them like that because the first one had to be in charge of more because they were close in age, and we assigned her probably roles that were really too much for her age, but one regard is she became very responsible, but maybe sometimes that's a little much, you know. So it's interesting, the whole nature nurture and how we shape that.
Yeah.
While we're on families and empathy, what about fairness? What advice do you have for children who are really stuck on everything being fair? That's not fair. This isn't fair.
So again, we have to look at one piece is we have to look at developmental stage. There's a stage of development, usually I want to say between the ages of 5 and 8, give or take months or years, but around that place where those kids are big rule followers and they get their pride from following the rules. And so that fair becomes very concrete and it becomes one of the rules. Well, to be very honest, there are some things that we want to always use the word fair for, like a fair game with no cheating, but life itself is not always fair. Right. So, again, natural consequences. If we don't incorporate natural consequences into the day-to-day, they're not going to also incorporate an understanding that sometimes things aren't fair. Like an example would be you were late getting somewhere and there are no balloons left. You're right. That does stink. We need to get here earlier next time. That's a natural consequence, right? But what do we see happening?
It's not fair even though you did what you're supposed to do or you're on time.
You're right.
Sometimes life just still isn't fair.
And guess what we can do when that happens? And this is where it becomes a parenting skill, and that is, man, sometimes life isn't skill and it hurts, but I am so proud of you because even though it's not fair, you are here and I'm just happy to be here with you. You really want to turn it around into a positive.
Right. And I always like to, I don't know if this is right from a behavior management point, but focusing on the family kind of as a team. I know that didn't really seem fair to you this time, but our goal as a family was to get here by this time or to do this. So that's just the way it had to be today. But there'll be another time when it works out in your favor, but kind of taking the emphasis more off of mine and my fairness and my justice.
Yes. But see now, so go back again. Remember we talked earlier about games and play? Yeah. You really want to teach fair. And that sometimes you win and sometimes you don't. Right. It's through those games.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah,
so it's back to play.
It does, because you're right about the whole family goal, but there's wide spaces between learning that opportunity.
Right.
Depending on your age.
That's true. What about, someone asked about getting children to follow directions. In their words, they said, on the first time, not the 47th time.
So I absolutely loved this question. And I'm going to say this in as nice and kind a way as I can. There is certainly a method that I know is widely embraced where children are given 3 chances to do something.
The counting. You hear it in Walmart. You hear it in the grocery store.
What that means is that they are learning to delay doing something they don't want to do. It's escape maintained behavior, right? We really want a child to do it the first time. The first time we ask, we're going to do it with them. And we're going to say, let's go, from a very young age. It's time to get your shoes. Let's go get your shoes. We're not going to delay. And then the second time, you're only going to give them 1 chance. You can get your shoes by yourself or I can help you. Well, now they're 2 and 3 and they want to be independent. Most kids are going to go get the shoes themselves because they don't want to be helped. But if they have to be helped, that's the natural consequence, right? You need to pick up your toys. You have a choice. You can pick up your toys now or I can put them in the trash bag. It's up to you, right? You have to follow through. Does it mean throw their toys out? No, you can put them in the attic. I mean, you can do whatever you want with them, but the reality is if they don't pick them up the first time, go get them, put them away, get them out of reach. So if you want them to respond the first time, You have to enforce it. Yeah. And then you have to recognize that there are going to be times, again, transitions, they're not going to respond the first time because they're in the middle of something. And just like you're going to say, wait, I have to stir the soup one more time, sometimes you're going to have to also be reasonable in your expectations.
Right. I always, it's not just with toddlers, with my kids who are teen and preteen, can you guys please pick up your shoes? Can you guys please pick up your shoes? Can you guys please pick up your shoes? If you don't pick up your shoes, I'm like, why are you so angry? Well, I asked you nicely 5 times and you didn't listen. So the only way you do anything is when I explode. And I don't want to explode. I don't like to explode. But it's the only thing that tends to get your attention. And I don't like that.
Right.
So it doesn't just stop with...
No.
So really, what you're saying, Chrissy, is I should just ask once, and if they don't listen, I should throw their shoes away.
So here's where, again, remember developmental stages, right?
Yeah.
So what do teens want?
They're distracted.
They are, but they also want to be independent, and in theory, this is when we're really teaching them responsibility. But they're also they get things, right? And so they're going to come running down the stairs and say, my movie starts in 10 minutes, and I'm going to say, I had to wait 2 days for you to pick up your shoes, so maybe we should wait 2 days to go to the movies.
Ooh.
One of my aunts said that her sons didn't do what they were supposed to do, so when it came time to drive them to baseball practice, she was like,
no,
I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
And so they had to walk. Of course, this is back when walking yourself to practice would be acceptable. But she said, you didn't do what I asked you to do, so I'm not doing what you asked me to do.
And you can remind them of that, right? So, because really that's a more appropriate response to a teenager, and that's natural consequences. Or natural consequences are, you know what, I'm having company. You did not help me put your things away, which means I had to clean up your stuff. You guys are going to have to just wait. No, you can't have your friends over. No.
Right.
I had to delay having my friends over. You're going to delay having your friends over.
Right.
So really making it natural. I
also find, too, in terms of the independence, surprisingly, if I'm here saying pick up, it doesn't happen. But if I go to work and I leave a list and it's their timeline and their schedule without me being here, they're a little better at doing it because they can control it.
Yeah, I would agree with that also. And that's part of it, becoming more controlling and more responsible.
And more independent.
Yeah.
Because they're going to move out. And I say my job is to make sure you're not jerks when you live with someone
That's
else.
right.
You know how to pick up your stuff and wipe down the counters and keep the bathroom tidy.
And sometimes, so here's another little thing about that. Sometimes, depending on the task we're asking them to do, and I'm looking at older children specifically, we think they know how to do it. We really are still doing too much for our kids.
Oh,
so
much.
So, like, my example is I would get really frustrated. This is so silly and maybe, a little yucky, but I'd get really frustrated because we split up chores this year. And by chores, like, they have big chores now. So my daughter's chore was to clean the bathroom. And I would go in there and I'm like, this isn't clean to my standard. And then I realized I actually never made her scrub a tub out before. I'd never done it. Right? And so she really, truly had no clue
how to do it.
Of how to scrub a tub the right way. And so I had to teach her, just like you would teach any other skill.
Right. That makes sense. Let's talk about power struggles. We often hear this concern from parents, especially of 3 and 4-year-olds. Assuming that that's the age that's common, how do we make that easier from a day-to-day standpoint?
So it depends on the kid. You're going to have some high intensity, but typically they're going into that concept of rule following. And so, you could certainly have a mini routine or a routine that allows for it. You could certainly say, when you wake up, you get to turn on the lights, but when I have to go to work, I get to turn off the lights. So you make it a very clear rule and expectation. I'm trying to think of how else to explain some of those opportunities. Some of it is just going to be learning the frustration of, no, not right now. And that's, again, tolerating frustration at an age-appropriate time and space. Right? So they're figuring it out, and that's the job. That is the job of that age. And those are nice, safe limits. And guess what? When you're setting a limit that says, no, you don't get to make the coffee today. It also means you're setting the limit of, when I say no, you can't play on the stove, you don't play on the stove. And when I say no, you don't run in the street, you don't run in the street. Like, we're starting with a very small, safe thing. The other piece to that is, it's a great time to give them jobs. They want to feel important and independent. Give them a job.
Right. And our final thing, really, Chrissy, that we wanted to talk with, and it is, I think, so important. And I'm glad that one listener, who I know personally is a parent and also a principal, so her heart is sincere here, is schools. And behavior in school is so hard. As therapists, obviously, we are huge advocates for inclusion whenever possible. And I know the principal who asked this question is as well. But then you have to balance unsafe behaviors for other students and for students that have behavioral challenges themselves. We know you've spent a lot of time in schools. What do you see that works to kind of balance that line of keeping kids safe and keeping kids included in general education settings as much as possible?
So it sounds like this is specific with kids who have identified struggles, right? And so, I can tell you my own experience as a teacher in special education and working with kids who, part of my goal for some of them was inclusion, and for some of them it wasn't. But for me, a big part of inclusion involved having the behavior that was necessary to be safe in a classroom, right? And I know that's not always possible in some schools, but really, when we look at schools that are effective, they're looking at the function of behaviors again. They're looking at what the child who is struggling needs, and they're also looking at the culture of the school. Some kids really do need more movement. Some kids need more time. I was thinking about a student that I had worked with once who was constantly tapping a pencil, and the teacher was so angry because they were tapping a pencil. Well, they had ADHD. They're sitting in a chair, right? So also looking at, what does that child need to be able to sit in a chair? In some schools, they've recognized that sitting on the ball is effective, and that helps children behave. Another one is, what are reasonable expectations? So is it a child who can't behave in the classroom when other things are imposed on them? Well, then the only skill they're learning is to behave in a classroom. Music or art might be too unstructured for them, so they do better in a structured room. But letting them do something quietly that's easy for them, but just learning how to be in a room with other people. It could be really looking at the function of the behavior, what it's communicating. If the behavior is communicating escape, meaning I don't want to be in here, I don't do this, maybe we need to listen to that behavior and say, okay, you want to escape from math? We're going to give you math because you still have to do it, but we're going to do that in this other setting that's more appropriate. Because the truth is, that's another one you have to wait out, right? It's another one with natural consequences.
I feel, too, like some of the best schools, and I know it's hard because resources are so limited in education, but some of the best schools will rely on behavioral specialists to come in and consult because they're a third party that can observe, what's going on with the child, what's going on in the environment, and give the school recommendations that can walk that line.
Yeah, and they can. So my experience, again, has been really interesting, and something that sometimes I love the school I'm in, and sometimes I did not. And because, for one thing, you have to have a teacher that feels safe and comfortable, and you also have to be reasonable about expectations of the parent. And then you might also have a child. I have had parents who fought, and they had money and lawyers to be able to have their child in that setting, and really it wasn't necessarily in the child's best interest. It wasn't just not in the classroom's best interest. So when we look at the culture of inclusion, what is the goal of inclusion, right? And so we have to look at it from its function and its foundation. Is the goal of inclusion, in my world, it was that we have children who maybe need things modified. So for example, maybe they need a little bit longer to take a test, Or maybe they just need to learn how to be in a space, but they're not quite ready for academics. It's giving them the opportunity to develop a skill that they can develop in a typical classroom without impeding other children from learning. So when we look at IEPs very specifically, there's a box that you check and it says, does this child's behavior, his ability to learn, or the ability of others to learn? And I've always found it interesting that there are many places who are reluctant to check that box. The other thing is they're reluctant sometimes to check it because you had asked way back about behavior. Sometimes the behavior doesn't look the same way. It could be they're disorganized, right? And they need strategies for organization, but their disorganization is really disruptive. Is it a bad behavior? No, they're not hurting anyone or kicking anyone. Is it a healthy behavior for them? No, they still have skills to learn. Does it mean they can't be included? They can be included, but perhaps we need to decrease the amount of organization that's required of them. Perhaps they really only need to keep one folder, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And the rest of it is,
individually.
Right. And how many times I can honestly say, where I've had children, and middle school especially, who have not developed those foundational skills, and we're putting them into a regular ed setting, and they're not organized, and their peers start to make fun of them, and then the teacher's frustrated, and then the parents are frustrated, and the truth is they're like, you have to be ready for high school. Well, no, that's your timeline. Your timeline is they have to be ready for high school. Their developmental timeline is not working that way. If it was, they would be ready, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, such a good point.
Yeah. So why is it such an effort? And so I say this very loosely, for the teacher to keep the folders on their desk. And if it is such an effort, well, then maybe that's where you look at having an assistant come into the room for 5 minutes. Maybe you have one person whose only job at the end of the day for the last period is to organize folders. And that child is learning to organize one folder well, right? That's your errorless learning procedure. That's your overcorrection because they're only practicing with one, but maybe they practice it more than once. Mm-hmm. But we have expectations that are not always reasonable. And so I know for some kids it can be very dangerous. Well, you don't belong in that setting if you're a danger to yourself or others. We're not helping you with your behavior. We're not helping anybody. All we're doing is setting everyone up for failure. So I don't have a full answer because the biggest cuts in funding seem to always go to where we need it the most.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And these are the kids who do need it the most. And sometimes I will hear things too like, well, there's nothing wrong with them. And I always think that's a little bit interesting, right? Because, well, then they wouldn't be behaving the way they're behaving. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, nobody's...
is a sign that something is
something's
them.
going on, right? And whether it's to get attention, I love hearing that. They just want attention. They don't care if it's negative attention or positive attention. I'm like, okay, so a kid who needs that much attention still has skills to learn, right? Mm-hmm. We still have to teach them skills. They still deserve, some genuine caring.
Yeah, it's true.
So
it's so good. All of this has been so good.
Oh, good.
I'm just curious if someone is listening and this really piques their interest and they want to learn more. Do you have favorite resources, books, websites, anything that you would recommend for people that want to learn more about behavior?
So I have one that's really silly. It's a little bit pricier, it's a little bit lengthier, but the Great Courses actually has a class, however they word it, and it's called Scientific Secrets for Raising Kids Who Thrive, which sounds really, I don't know how, to me it even sounded a little bit gimmicky, right? Mm-hmm. It is so well done about child development and understanding it and understanding those foundational skills. It really, and it gives great resources in addition to it. I think that was one of my favorite non-school-wide things that I looked at. Another one is with communication. There's actually two. And there's How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and How to Listen So Kids Will Talk. That's an oldie but goodie. I mean, I first got that as an undergrad in like 1990. And there have been many reprints made of that book. I think they've updated for one for teens. But that's a phenomenal book. And the third resource that I think has been really interesting for me and I'm looking into is nonviolent communication. And that's really listening, learning how to be a good active listener and how to respond. And then the other thing that I'm really looking at right now in increasing in terms of resources and understanding better is mindfulness, which is a buzzword. But what I'm learning is that even though we're using it, not everyone understands what mindfulness means or what it's about. And so at its very core essence, it's actually extremely behavioral. And mindfulness is in that very moment being aware of your body and what it's doing and your mind and what it's thinking, right? And so when I talk to people, they're like, right away, they kind of clue it into yoga or breathing or meditation, right? And not realizing it. And so when we look at things like anxiety or mindfulness in the moment, like even with little kids, we can do this. We can be like, you're scared and angry, what you had said before. We can reflect the words to help them develop the language.
Understand how they're feeling and give it a name.
Yeah, so especially probably around the ages of 3 and 4, I don't think it would be meaningful before that. But in that very moment, you're going to really reflect it. And then you're also going to maybe give them opportunities. So like my favorite things are body scans. Squeeze your toes, now let them go. Squeeze your hands, now let them go. I can tell you're angry because your hands are really tight. Squeeze them a little tighter, let them go. Letting them become really aware of the movements and the thoughts they're having when they feel that way. And also becoming very aware of what's happening right at that moment around you. Are you safe? Yes. Is something going on? And that also takes really good parenting skills, right? Because we have to be patient, and that's hard to do.
And aware ourselves.
Yeah.
To take the time to slow down and
Yep.
and be aware of the environment instead of so busy.
Yeah, exactly. So
those are great resources. So if you want to find Chrissy or the Renovo Center, their website is renovo center.com. Is that the best way for people to learn more about your center and about you?
Yeah, I have an email there. It's Christina at the Renovo Center at renovocenter.com, I believe. Yeah, and that's a nice, easy way to be able to reach out and feel free to ask
Chrissy,
questions.
you're a jewel to our community. And to us, really, personally, we can't thank you enough. She's getting over bronchitis and took honey breaks to stifle her cough during our session. But we could talk to you for hours. We'll have to have you back again because there's so much to learn from you. And we hope that all of you have found it helpful. Just to remind you, if you want to find more about our business and any of the resources that we have available, our website is milestonesandmiracles.com with the and spelled out. We have a blog there with extensive resources. We have links to social media with lots of free goodies. We have links to our lectures through MedBridge Education with a generous discount code there for listeners. And of course, you have access to purchase 1, 2, 3 Just Play With Me in print and an ebook format if that's something that you can find to help you be reminded of what typical really looks like and to take that typical information and apply it to some of these behavior strategies that we've talked about today. So thank you so much.
Thank you
for being here. We'll see you next time. Keep playing.